Hey everybody, welcome to RAINER Radio. I am your host, Joshua Rainer. Today my guest is Anabology. Mr. Anabology, welcome to the show.
Yeah, happy to be here.
We've been Twitter mutuals for a while, and I feel like I don't really know much about your background and your history in health and nutrition. So if you wouldn't mind kind of giving people a little bit of your background.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think I got into health like not through a really traditional way. I think originally I came in from biohacking, so I was doing like engineering school. I went to Texas A&M originally, and I was like didn't really care about it. Thought that I was doing nuclear engineering, and I thought that there was like no future in that because of all these regulatory burdens. And at the same time, I was just like interested in messing around and like doing drugs and do, messing with like nootropics and all these things. And I didn't want to kill myself while I did that. So I just like started reading into all of these papers on what things can interact and how these things work, so I don't just like give myself serotonin syndrome and die. And the and I found that it was like really easy for me to read papers for some reason. Like I just got like super engaged with it. I don't know if like if people have like traded crypto, you get like when you gamble or just like trade crypto or do things like that, you get this like hyper focus into it. Like it's so easy to be engaged and just like everything in the world around you just like melts away and you can just like only focus on this one super stimulating thing. Same thing with like scrolling and all that stuff. I felt like at the beginning it was like that way with papers. I could just like read all day, um, and and then eventually I kind of like stumbled my way through different health forums and tried to find like the best information on this. And I found longevity people. So there was a forum called Longevity, which is like an old internet forum, kind of maybe started to grow around the same time as like the Repeat forum. And people started talking about longevity there, and I didn't even know it was an option at that point. I just like wanted to party and do nootropics and like have a good time. Didn't really care about what I was doing in school. But then I found that people were like trying to not die, and I was like, I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't know that it was an option to not die. So then I got like super obsessed with that, and then I kind of like read into all of this stuff and had all the background, but I never like made the connection between longevity and just being healthy, which was kind of weird. So I think like there's a subtle thing that happens where people eat a bunch of food that's like really terrible for them, do all these unhealthy habits, and say in their head, "Oh, I want to be healthy. I want to live for a long time," but then just not realize that the inputs in the world around you are actually like affecting, how you feel, and that's just like the normal like baseline in our population. I think it's like very different on health Twitter and all the spaces we're interested in, where everyone knows that like, oh, obviously food's important, but if you talk to like a random boomer off the street, they're not gonna know that. Maybe until RFK came along. But anyway, so I had like all these health issues at the time, despite like being really read into health, and I had like chronic migraines. I was pretty sad, just like all of these different, like my gut was destroyed, and like in pain constantly, and I, never really solved it until uh, one day I ended up getting this internship, and I moved to really far upstate New York, and I there was only like a KFC near where I was staying for that internship, and so every single day I had KFC, um, and it like destroyed me. So like for context, during college, I got this like pretty bad brain injury. I was like skateboarding down a parking garage. A car came, swinging around the corner, and I kind of got thrown off my skateboard and hit the back of my head, and had like a brain bleed, and it was like really brutal. My face was like half paralyzed for a couple months afterwards. I like lost half my vision for a day, and eventually like I kind of healed from that. But during that entire time, I had like terrible migraines. I was just like in pain all the time, and KFC was like worse than that. I just like felt worse than having like a brain bleed after after like a month or two of KFC.
I honestly think KFC is like one of the worst fast foods. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't eat much of it these days, but except for pretty much just like In and Out, and I'll eat some McDonald's sometimes. Um, but actually remember the last time I had KFC. It was in college, and it was it was when I was at Coachella, and I felt so terrible all day. I had to keep going to the bathroom, and it was just like the grossest, slimiest, grimiest thing. Um, yeah,
Which,
there's something
yeah.
especially horrendous about it.
Well, and I should have realized because I walk in there and people look like de-differentiated. Like there were just people who were like 400 pounds and not the shape of a human anymore.
They
And I
block.
should have realized that that was going to happen to me eventually. So like basically for the couple months I was up there, I just like ate KFC every day. I gained like 25 pounds, like just a pure fat, and was kind of like skinny fat. And then I had like the worst migraines of my life, like even worse than when I had a brain injury. So then I was like, okay, like there's something clearly like here between like food and how I feel. So then I did a carnivore diet, and it kind of like reduced my migraines. I lost all the weight, and but I never felt like super great, and kind of found my way eventually through Paul Saladino and then eventually Ray Pete, and kind of like progressively got more and more healthy to keep it short. But yeah, for KFC, one of the things that I like recently learned just about like fryer oils at restaurants is that they put this thing in there in the fryer called anti-foam. It's just like dimethyl polysiloxane or something, and what that does is it stops it from foaming, right? But what foaming is when you have like fryer oil is degraded compounds that are like making it foam, and all of these compounds are the things that are like acutely toxic to you. Like certain ones you can use to just like reprogram cells into cancer-like cells in the lab. Other compounds are like the signals that your body uses natively for oxidative stress, and all of these things are like preformed in the seed oils and fryers, but uh, they're just like somehow allowed, and it happens after like you cycle heating and cooling like one or two times they start to appear. Um, but they just put the anti-foam in the fryer oils to keep being able to use the fryer oil while the oil is like half degraded. So, and this is like at every restaurant. This is even with the
So
tallow frying
all of
restaurant.
that stuff stays in the oil then, and it gets in your food.
Exactly,
Okay. And you said
exactly.
that like it's not just like a KFC place, like every place that use fryer oil uses
Well, the,
this compound?
yeah, so I found that like Buffalo Wild Wings and Popeyes, and I was like looking at them, and apparently they don't. They use beef tallow or beef fat for the fryer oil, but all of them have like the anti-foam in it as well, which means they're even with beef tallow you can degrade it into all these like toxic compounds.
That's funny because I've found out only relatively recently, maybe within the last year or two, that Popeyes uses tallow. But I always felt that Popeyes was substantially better. It was a more enjoyable fried chicken to eat. Like it, the KFC has such like a sliminess to it, where Popeyes is kind of lighter and drier in a sense, a little bit more crunch. But I also just felt like it tasted better, and I felt like, not that I think it's good to have Popeyes, especially because it's not even if it's tallow, like they still, in addition to the foaming agent, isn't there still some amount of like seed oil in it too?
Yeah, there's some seed oil, but if you look at there have been studies where you take seed oils and you take beef tallow and then you heat them up and then cool them in fryers day after day for like a month. And beef tallow, definitely for the first like two or three times that you reheat it, is like totally fine and not degraded at all. Whereas like the seed oils start out at like 10% degraded, but over the entire month, like all of them can degrade into like similarly toxic compounds.
Right.
Um, which is like what the anti-foam helps like prevent. It like makes it where you can still cook the fryer oils without them foaming over the top while they're degraded. So this, whenever they have this in their fryer oils, it's a sign that, oh, they're probably cooking it long enough for the tallow to degrade. I
Interesting.
think the only one that doesn't do that is Steak and Shake. I don't think they have like the anti-foam or the BHT in their tallow, but they're par frying all of their food so far, like still. So that means they're getting like frozen French fries that were fried in seed oils, and then they're putting them into beef tallow.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember, they kind of made that whole announcement they were switching to tallow, and then it was like a month ago it came out that, the potatoes that they're still getting in are still already fried in seed oil. So, um, it's kind of bullshit of a claim there, and I guess we're still a ways to go to get, these bigger chains, um, into better frying oils and getting tallow more popular. But it's interesting you said that you were introduced to Ray Pete so through Paul Saladino, right? He was like the gateway for you.
yeah, pretty much. I think it might have been that Georgie went on. No, it must have been before that. I mean, it's been a few years since I was introduced to Ray Pete. I think I was open to the idea of sugar because of Paul Saladino. And
Interesting.
then it was really, after Elon bought Twitter, and then I just got on Twitter and found people in the repeat Twitter space that I really like learn about repeat. I'm not like a repeat OG, but I consume information like autistically.
Yeah. No,
So
I mean, it's I really love the Twitter repeat community. Some of my favorite people. And it's a very interesting mix of different kind of types of people. But a big thing is, the work doesn't just like, it's not just a static thing that lasts forever, right? Like Ray was building on top of people's work, and we still need people building on top of his work. So we still have progress to make, and there's still infinite things to perceive, think, and act. And that's one of the things I really like about you is that I feel like you've kind of taken what you've been inspired by Ray, and maybe other people, Georgie and Danny, and other Twitter posters. And this honey diet thing that you came up with, it's interesting because I want to kind of ask you how you got into it, but it seems like this is kind of something that at least for me, without any knowledge of any of like the Pete stuff that I know about now, is just like a really convenient way to eat that I found when I was training training strongman, competing as an athlete. I found it just so much easier and more convenient to just kind of eat carbs during the day and not have any like proper meals, so to speak, until the end of the day, for convenience. But I'm really curious, like, how did you kind of create this diet structure of the honey diet?
well, I think it's actually related to your Coke diet. So like there were these studies done on mice where mice were just fed Coca-Cola, and like ridiculous things happened where one of the studies they showed that it was like in 1982 they fed mice a bunch of Coke, and they were able to eat 50% more calories without gaining weight, and then they had just like this crazy cold resistance. And then they kind of explained it by separating out both the sugar and the caffeine and all of that and the sparkling water, and trying to see if the like either any of those would contribute to the results. And I think independently both sugar and caffeine increased the cold tolerance and increased the calorie expenditure. So it wasn't just like the caffeine and the Coke that was doing it. And then a study many years later, like 2010, there was a group of people in Brazil trying to study how bad soft drinks were on like blood lipids. And they were like, oh, Coke is surely going to ruin the cardiometabolic parameters of these mice or rats. And they fed them a bunch of Coke, and surely they saw a little bit of an increase in triglycerides, and that was all they saw on the lipid side. But then if you look into the data that they didn't really comment on, the mice that drank the Coke instead of water drank and ate about 4 times the calories as the control mice, and they didn't gain any weight. So I was looking at all of these. I was like, how are these like animals eating just insane amounts of sugar and not gaining weight? This is like counter to even Paul Saladino's ideas, because this is just pure sugar. It's not fruit, which has these special magical properties and information, as he calls it, that makes the sugar okay. But it's like pure
It's
high
natural,
fructose corn syrup.
natural sugar,
Yeah,
natural.
natural.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just like high fructose corn syrup, and it's working. It's not even like the cane sugar Coke. And so like I dug into all of these studies and all of like the things around that. There were some lifespan studies too, with low protein, high sugar diets, and all of these kind of showed a signal around this hormone called FGF21, which if you overfeed an animal or a person with sugar and feed them no protein at all or very low protein, then they overexpress this hormone called FGF21, which increases the metabolic rate, probably even more than their calorie intake if you have the right macro ratio. So then I was like, okay, well, I'm still kind of skeptical of high fructose corn syrup. Like the Paul Saladino brainworm is still in me, and maybe I should do something that's like more natural, but some sugar source that has like no nutrients in it, and I can just eat a ton of without poisoning myself. So I just decided to go with honey and try that and see if I could replicate these studies like in myself and like lose weight by eating more calories. And it seemed to work. And you know, I mean, it's been like a couple of years since I think it maybe I think over a full year now, not a couple years. I think just over a full year, year and a half since I started it. And initially it kind of like blew up for a second, and then it like went away. But then people started trying it themselves, and it worked in like many more people. So it kind of just stuck around, had some mimetic qualities to it.
Yeah, so really quick, I'm curious with those rat studies or rodent studies with the Coke.
Mhm.
Um, were they feeding what the soda or whatever source of sugar alongside other food groups, protein and fat meals, and it was just increasing sugar, or were they separating the foods like apart from each other?
So I think there must have been separation, but not artificially. Like
Okay.
as I understand, the studies were ad lib, so they were able to eat as much as they want. They just had like unlimited access to the chow. Um, yeah, I would have to check again, but they did replace the water source with Coke, right? So they could drink as much Coke anytime they wanted, just all the time. And they measured the amounts of chow and the amount of the liquid eaten. So I don't necessarily think it was like separated artificially, and they didn't talk about that in the studies as far as I know. But just like the behavior of the rats might have made some sort of separation, right? Because I assume that if they drank like 2,000 calories of Coke just in one sitting, they wouldn't go and eat a bunch of food as well at the same time. But
Yeah, I mean,
maybe they did.
I would, maybe assume, or especially based on my own experience, that, as long as you separate the sugar from the rest of the chow, then they can have pure sugar or they can eat, a mixed meal chow. And so they have the ability to just do sugar, 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 and then go to the chow at a later time. And so, I want to ask you more about the FGF21 hormone. Um, it's something that it seems like is a really integral part of this. Um, and funny enough, like you mentioned that you just like pour and pour over studies, and myself, like I've been interested in nutrition since I was in high school when I was like trying to gain weight for football. So I've kind of been at this like pretty legit like for over 20 years. But all my interest in nutrition was really not usually centered around like diving deep into the science and reading lots of studies. I was just kind of trying to like, let me understand a concept and then try it. Let me understand a concept and then try it. And so, it's like, at least for myself, it's like I really am so grateful for the people like you who get into the studies and then give me an idea. And it's lately I was specifically trying to understand more of the FGF21, which if anyone saw the video I posted yesterday about the cupcakes, this woman did a study, or was talking about a study, and a high carbohydrate meal makes you fat. And then she said, well, you ate a bunch of cupcakes. um, and so I've been like trying to see other perspectives and other people talking about FGF21, because people have been talking about it for longevity's sake. And it seems like most of the work on FGF21 comes from actually keto and fasting studies. So, I'd love for you to explain what FGF21 is for everybody and how it works and everything like that.
Yeah.
But just really quickly, like, is it something that just requires protein restriction, or the sugar, is it necessary to stimulate FGF21?
So I think like strictly, it's not necessary to induce a little bit of FGF21, but if you want like the maximum induction of FGF21, you definitely need to add some sort of calorie that's deficient in protein. So the way I understand FGF21, it's like been named 50 billion different things. There's like the starvation hormone, the sugar hormone, the overfeeding hormone. Like people just like name it 50 different things, but it's
They've
uh,
named it both the starvation hormone and the overfeeding hormone.
yeah, people have named it like a billion things that are all conflicting with each other. It's kind of ridiculous. What I understand it to be is in certain states the liver will see less, like a low protein ratio compared to the rest of the calories, right? So in fasting, you can induce some FGF21 if you're burning a lot of fat and you don't have that much protein being taken off of your muscles. So then what that looks like is it looks like you're eating fat and you aren't eating protein. So then you may increase the metabolic rate like a little bit. And then there's other kind of anti-catabolic effects that happen with fasting, so you don't just like melt away all of your body mass and all of your muscle immediately. Um, but that I think is why you see some induction in fasting. But what it really does is when you eat like sugar or fats alone without protein is the liver releases FGF21 because it sees all of these calories and it doesn't see enough protein, and then it thinks that it has to burn all of these calories in some way eventually to get your protein intake with this protein deficient food source. That's what I understand. And I can rephrase that. So like from an evolutionary perspective, what I think happened is that mammals have had periods where there were food sources available that had a really high amount of one macro, like fat or sugar or carbs or whatever, and also had a very low amount of protein. So then imagine my protein intake that I need every day is like 60 to 100 grams, like baseline, as just like an adult male. Well, imagine all I have to eat is fruits in my environment. There's like no animals that are sufficient for me to kill. All I can do is eat fruits. Well, I would need like 6,000 calories of fruits to get the protein intake that I need. So it would be insane if I could only eat 2,000 calories of fruit. And then after that, I start to get fatty liver, diabetes, all the things that people associate with sugar. So what I think happened is that the evolution figured out that it could just increase the metabolic rate and then eat more and then hold on to the protein that it gets in these like protein deficient food sources and just like burn off the excess calories, and do that to avoid getting fatty liver or the other diseases associated with too many calories without burning them. So, so it works with both fat and sugar. And I think that's why in fasting and other in keto too, it can be induced, but it just has to be with low protein.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes more sense, at least for me, that you either need an overabundance of carbs or an overabundance of fat to signal to the body that, hey, we're not starving. We have a source of calories, but we don't really have protein. And then otherwise it's like, you would just wither away entirely. So it makes sense that your body would really get better at processing these abundant source of calories, right? You're signaling abundance to the body, just not having protein. So the thing that I wonder though is, could you do high carbs and fat and not get fat and also preserve your lean body mass? Like, is there any reason to believe that that's possible, or it really has to be one macronutrient or the other?
So yeah, it seems like it would be possible based on this mechanism, but I don't think that you know one mechanism doesn't really tell you everything, right? In my experience, I tried like an ice cream diet where I just ate 6,000 calories of ice cream in a day, and I never reached this satiety threshold that I get with sugar. Sometimes when I eat enough sugar, I kind of start to feel like nauseous, and I'm like, oh, I don't even want any more sugar, and I have like some sort of sweet aversion, which is what FGF21 generally gives you. Is actually that's like what it feels like. It feels like sweet aversion to most people.
That's interesting.
Um, but with sugar, I get that. And then when I ate ice cream, I could just eat unlimited ice cream and I could never stop. And I definitely gained some fat from that. But I was also eating like a protein dinner, right? So I would be interested to see if
So
you
you
just go,
weren't really doing just ice cream. You weren't doing this like,
yeah.
yeah.
So what I think like might have been the issue here is that if you wear a CGM, you burn off all the glucose within like a couple hours when you're in like an only sugar eating phase with no protein, no fat. But then whenever I ate protein, my blood sugar could be slightly elevated for like 12 hours, suggesting that the protein, which kind of um, causes a little bit of insulin resistance, was elevated in my blood for like 12 hours. And then same thing with like fats, right? If people can measure their circulating levels of lipids, and fats are usually still elevated for like 12 hours after eating a fatty meal. So maybe the honey diet works because the blood sugar is burned off so fast and you just like use it, and then once you get to dinner and you eat the high protein meal, you're like completely reset metabolically. But with like the ice cream diet, when I ate that during the day and then eat the high protein meal at dinner, maybe I still had like really high levels of fat in my blood, and I just like didn't burn it off in time. And then I started putting the fat into my fat instead of into energy. So I would be interested. And if anyone tries this, like just pure ice cream diet, no protein at all, just just like do like a high fat, high carb diet with like next to no protein. And I would recommend if you do this, try and get like some egg yolks as well, because I think choline can be protective in exporting fats from the liver. Like if you really want to prevent a fatty liver from this diet, because it's kind of risky with that model, just get some like egg yolks. But yeah, I think it could be done.
Yeah, the thing that I've always wondered about when it comes to nutrition is, regardless of what diet people do or approach nutrition, there's usually generally this concept of like a day is actually like of course it's like a measure of time, but it's like your body has like actual days, right? And you might say it's circadian rhythm or something. And then some people, it's like, oh, well, you just need this much of a calorie deficit over a week to lose weight, kind of a thing. So, okay, as opposed to this is what you do in one day, it's this is what you do over a week. With the honey diet approach of having, uh, um, well, really quickly, in case anyone hasn't heard of the honey diet yet, can you just kind of, I know it's on your website, but can you kind of just lay it out for people so they know what we're talking about?
Yeah, so the honey diet general idea was that there are all these studies with high sugar causing weight loss in protein deficient settings. But if you look at mortality data with humans who have done a really low protein diet, it looks really bad. Like there are people who are chronic kidney disease patients, and they have been put on low protein diets to protect their kidneys because like protein can be stressful to kidneys. And despite it improving their kidney health and kidney, disease, they ended up dying at much higher rates on like a low protein diet. So it's like, okay, low protein diet is bad, but I want to be able to abuse this mechanism and get the weight loss. So what I did was create a diet where there was this sugar phase at the first part of the day where you overeat sugar with no protein. And then eventually you burn all of that off. And then you have a high protein dinner after you've kind of reset yourself metabolically. So I just like temporally separated the, uh, you know, sugar and then protein phases to abuse this high sugar mechanism. And originally, I was eating a pound of honey, a pound of dates, or sorry, half a pound of dates during the first part of the day. And then for dinner, I was eating a pound of beef and like a pound of vegetables. And I increased my calorie intake by like 1,000 calories, and I lost 10 pounds over about a month.
Yeah, it's interesting, that if you eat in a way that isn't all like mixed meals, that you can kind of feel how that certain foods process and kind of digest on their own, which is why a lot of uh, people have tried various types of mono diets where you just eat like one type of food exclusively. And then even in other diets, you kind of have like mono meals where like, you might have a variety of meals throughout the day, but each meal itself is like one food. Um, and the splitting of the foods has been something that, like I said before, it's something that I came to naturally. A lot of my interest in nutrition first came because I wanted to like I was an athlete and I wanted to put on muscle, and you want to be like jacked and you want to be shredded, right? So you want to build muscle and you want to lose fat. And but at a certain point you kind of start to experience that different foods make you feel different ways. And then I had some issues with digestion. Like when I was a kid, I had a lot of issues with bloating, and I don't know like if it was literally lactose intolerance, but it definitely seemed associated with dairy, maybe exclusively milk, where I would just be bloated and like constipated for days at a time. Like I did not have like a good time going to the bathroom as a kid. And so then when I became an athlete and just a general fitness enthusiast, experimenting with diets, I would notice that like, oh man, like this food is just like sitting really heavy. And that's why I said, I first kind of came to something that looked like this about 7 years ago or so, 7, 8 years ago, maybe now, because I was kind of like following what I kind of refer to as like a paleo-ish bodybuilding diet. So an emphasis on um, meat and animal products, and recognizing that fat is good, saturated fat is good, and also trying to pick foods that maybe not exclusively like ancestrally paleo, but that just are supposed to have lower, anti-nutrients, whatever you want to call it. So I would eat white rice, even if it wasn't paleo, because in my mind, it's like, okay, well, this is a good source of carbs and it digests well. And so, I would often for breakfast have like, uh, you know, a big omelet or something, like 6 eggs and like some chicken breast and then some like oatmeal. And then I would just be like, oh man, I just like for 2 hours, it would just like sit in my gut. And I'd be like, well, I want to go to the gym. I want to go about my day and get all the stuff I need to get done today. And it would just be this thing that would like hold up my day. And at some point, I don't really know what inspired this. I think I was just kind of experimenting with what worked. I started just having a quickly, easily made breakfast that digested well, and it would usually be like Greek yogurt and oatmeal. I would make like overnight oats, and then I would throw some Greek yogurt because in my mind it's like, well, you need protein spread throughout the day, and maybe I'd add some like frozen fruit, and I would just be like, oh man, like I can eat it, and like if 30 minutes later, I can go crush my workout, and then like go to work, go do whatever I need to do, and then I would just keep eating carbs. Like I would drink orange juice during my workout. Sometimes if I was trying to gain weight, I would drink raw milk during my workouts. And at the time I was living in Venice Beach, I would go walk down to the boardwalk and go get an acai bowl. And it kept me like quite literally light on my feet. I felt like I had more energy. I could work out. I didn't have this, but it was like specifically designed to not feel like something was like sitting in my gut. And then I would eat like meat and rice for dinner, and I was still tracking my macros and kind of getting the full spectrum of things. I just like separated my day into like, here's the energizing part and here's the nourishing part. And that was kind of confirmed with by an old coach of mine, my strongman coach, who was really interested in nervous system. His kind of brand was called Strong Fit, and it was kind of like bringing strongman style training to CrossFitters to make them more well-rounded. And he was really interested in the nervous system as it like pertained to training. And then he started thinking about the nervous system in regards to diet. And it seems like carbs stimulate or kind of put your body in what's called like the task positive network, in kind of go and get things done. And he kind of always talked about like eating for what's to come. A lot of training is like eating what you did before, like, oh, I just did this and now I'm going to eat that because of my workout. And this kind of flipped it on its head. It's like, no, eat for what you're going to do next, because when you're doing your next thing is while your food's digesting. And so he kind of, it's funny because I think everything that we're talking about here, there's a carb side to it and there's a fat side to it that seems to stimulate the metabolism in a similar way, perhaps with different effects. But that's why you see like an ex-fat loss type of person who, for people that know, I think ate like at one point like an exclusively heavy cream diet and lost like, I don't know, 100 pounds or something. And he's posted his thyroid panel, and I'm pretty sure he has like a better thyroid panel, lower TSH than like any Peter I've ever seen. So it seems like there's something about either sugar or saturated fat that are very good for the metabolism, and if you eat them without protein, you get some kind of like, maybe it's just as simple as FGF21. Maybe there's some other related compounds, but like there's something very unique to that, and I feel like that's like where the future of metabolic health is kind of going.
Yeah, right. And when it comes to heavy cream, there's like a couple things that I would want to note here. One, it's possible that heavy cream concentrates thyroid hormone. So it's possible that like there is like a little bit of thyroid hormone in milk generally, and it's probably going to be in the fat soluble fraction. So like it's possible that he is actually supplementing thyroid hormone, but like through the heavy cream,
That's so
which
interesting.
uh, but on the other side of that, it does seem like heavy cream would be a good candidate to work with this type of FGF21 mechanism. So I've seen people try kind of high carb, like starchy diets, and maybe even similar ones with like other types of fat, where you do, um, I don't know, like stearic acid keto, and like the keto does seem to work generally, but like with maybe like low protein. And I think I've like the best success that I've seen is probably like the heavy cream diet and then high sugar like low protein diets out of these compared to starch or just like beef tallow. And I think the reason for that is sugar, like specifically like fructose in the sugar, targets the liver more directly, and so does MCT. MCT like goes directly to the liver, and you kind of end up in this circumstance where like the liver sees more calories than the rest of the body, and the liver is the thing that releases the hormone FGF21. So that means that whenever the liver is saying, "Hey," to the rest of the body, we need to burn a lot of calories, the liver thinks that there's more calories than there actually are. So then it tries to burn even more than you intake when you eat sugar or MCT oils specifically, right? And cream has plenty of MCT. So I think that it works worse with like starches, like pure glucose, or maybe stearic acid, if you're doing the specific like FGF21 kind of hacking mechanism. It would work best with MCT and fructose.
That's interesting because stearic acid has been, I think, especially because of Brad Marshall,
Mhm.
um, stearic acid has gotten super popular as this like metabolic fuel or a way, especially to lose belly fat, and maybe it
Mhm.
like stimulates like brown adipose tissue or something. I'm not
Yeah.
exactly sure the mechanism, but does would that then kind of lend oneself to think that there's like, I mean, obviously it's more complicated than this, but there's kind of like these two main mechanisms that were like trying to get the metabolism going, and one of them is the croissant diet,
Mhm.
which is Brad Marshall's diet, which is a high starch, high stearic acid diet. So you have starch and stearic acid on one side, and then you have fructose and MCT on the other side. Um,
Yeah.
is it like, do we think it's kind of like one or the other? Can they both interplay, or what do you really think is happening here?
Yeah. So I think that with the stearic acid and glucose diet, so starch is just a chain of glucose. Um, I think it's like a totally different like approach and mechanism than this like FGF21 hacking, and I think that it would work better in a mixed macro setting. So if you want to eat like protein, carbs, fat all at the same time, it would probably be better if you do the stearic acid and glucose like starch diet. And the reason why I say that is like I think that the reasoning behind that type of diet is one. There's this guy Peter. He writes the hyperlipid blog, and his idea with stearic acid is that the stearic acid produces a lot of reactive oxygen species, just ROS, in your mitochondria, and this is like a primitive signal for satiety. So then it causes the cells to be insulin resistant that it's being metabolized in. And this is actually like a good type of insulin resistance in his eyes because you add calories in, and then the cell starts to resist insulin. It basically says to the body it's full, and then it starts to reject calories. So certain fuel sources like fructose can kind of bypass insulin and just get into cells anyway. So if you take stearic acid and then you eat a bunch of fructose, well, the stearic acid isn't going to prevent the fructose from entering the cells, but it will prevent glucose from entering the cells, right? Because glucose is insulin dependent. So then you get like kind of the double whammy. You get like stearic acid making, maybe your fat cells or the cells that are full already start to reject calories. And then the glucose is readily rejected and kept in blood. And then you eventually can either metabolize it once you're ready or just pee it out because it gets into your urine as well. So, like, I think the stearic acid glucose idea is like your body kind of just rejects these calories. And then the MCT fructose idea is speed up the metabolism to handle the calories.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there's like this satiety driven metabolism, and then like a hunger driven metabolism, and I don't know how much like leptin and ghrelin come into play here. Um, but I mean, I definitely feel like I have, when I try to do things that stimulate my hunger, so much of dieting is try to make you not hungry. But
Mhm.
when I do things that like specifically stimulate my hunger, I have so much more energy. And I feel so much better. It's like kind of mind blowing. Um, just because I've kind of been someone who like, I've been very active and a healthy minded person my whole life. And like sleep was always an issue, and just kind of not feeling like I had enough energy in general. And it really wasn't until I went like all out on some type of honey diet, sugar diet type dynamic that I started to feel like a massive change in like every element of my life. And it's funny because like my kind of initial interest in this was like specifically to like lose fat. I kind of came to a lot of Pete's work kind of like after I was like a healthy, hard charging athlete and sort of had a bunch of health problems. And, um, I had meningitis a couple years ago and I was just like super sick. And I just kind of needed to eat like everything I could to kind of like recover. And so then I put on a bunch of weight. Um, and I'm actually surprised that I haven't been losing that much fat. Um, but one of the things that I've been looking into is, I've been like a paleo inspired person for pretty much almost like as long as I've been into nutrition. Like, yeah, there was like high school, but then in college, I got into CrossFit and it was like paleo. And so everything is very like, meat centric, animal food centric. And some like either like carbs are an evil or carbs are a necessary evil if you're an athlete. It was always like you have to earn your carbs. You have to offset your carbs by training. And so even when I would eat a lot of carbs, it was like, if you didn't work out though, you didn't deserve the carbs. And if you ate them, they would just like all be fat. Um, and so what's so funny now, it's like it's so weird to like think of myself from a number of years ago, hearing myself say this now. But it's like I probably spend a non insignificant amount of time watching like high carb vegan influencers like Durian Ryder, and he's honestly kind of just entertaining more than anything. Um, and then there's this other girl called Nutrition by Victoria, and they really promote this like super high carb vegan, very pro sugar. It's like vegan peating in a sense, um, where it's just like sugar, 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 and then some starch as well too to like maybe be more of a nourishing food or with training to get more calories in. Because otherwise, there's no place to go, even within like peating. There's only this like new kind of development that's come out of some of us talking like about really going over the top with sugar and doing a more high carb low fat thing. There's really no one out there who's like talking about how good sugar is while also not being a vegan. And then even amongst the vegans, they still tend to have like a sugar is bad. um One of the people that gets brought up by Durian Ryder and a lot of these vegan people is like a Dr. McDougall, who wrote a book called The Starch Solution. And so he was like a high carb vegan, but it was still very starch centric and sugar's not so great. And it's really only the people that were basically inspired by Durian Ryder who are just like, no, 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 actually sugar is amazing. And when you just like cram sugar, all of a sudden all these other kind of things come into place. And so, I'm more than anything, I like to experiment. And so I've been going, basically, I'm not vegan by any means. I don't believe in veganism, but I've been going like days as a vegan just to see like what happens when I just eat nothing but carbs. And I feel great. My digestion's great. I sleep great. Um, I don't really feel like I've lost any significant amount of muscle. I don't lift like super often, but like, I don't know. Maybe there really is something to when you just go such high carb that your body does, um your body maintains it, it protects its muscle mass. Like there's something else going on here, and it feels like there's we almost like need like a whole new genre of people to like dive deep further into this, like outside of the vegans.
Right. Yeah, I think the vegans might have discovered it first because it kind of works by default if you're doing like raw vegan with high sugar. Because, maybe I think like some of the pitfalls of vegans is that they can end up doing like a lot of tofu and all this like indigestible plant matter and all these anti-nutrients and things. But if you end up going basically fruitarian and maybe don't overdo the avocados, then you end up with this like really high sugar, low protein diet, which seemingly works by the same way as I think the honey diet works. I don't know if like I don't know if it's you know, better to do it where you end up getting like the meat in the end of the day and eat maybe like 3,000, 3,500 calories, or just eat like the 6,000 calories of fruit that you need to get the, protein intake. But it seems like, people like Freely, the banana girl as well, kind of did this where she would just eat like a ton of bananas and then eat a giant bowl of pasta and just look insanely thin. Uh,
Yeah, it's one of the thing I like about anything that's like peat adjacent is that what you're doing is you're basically describing how the body works and you're giving tools to people. So none of I mean, something like the honey diet or sugar diet might be like a diet within that framework. But the kind of idea is like how much can we understand about the body? So how can we that way, any person can decide what it is that they want to do to give themselves the results that they want. And you know, like I said, like of course, a lot of interest in nutrition is to look a certain way, and then there's a perform a certain way, and that performance is usually just sort of encapsulated by something that looks like the gym or an athletic endeavor. But you want to perform in your whole life, and that's where like this has got my interest more than anything. Is again just saying like I just have so much energy. And, I've struggled with insomnia my whole life. I, would stay up past midnight, like every single night of my life. And for the past few weeks, like I wear a Fitbit and I kind of have like a sleep schedule. Like my average is like an 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. kind of thing, which is like completely unheard of for me outside of the time that I was working on a farm and, I was just like so exhausted because I was waking up at like 4 a.m. that inevitably you fall asleep at like 9:30, 10. Um, but the thing that I'm kind of wondering is, especially like for myself, is I did think, especially because I've been doing days at a time that are pure carb, no, I mean, obviously there's trace protein in some of the carbs in rice and pasta. And when I do those pure carb days, I feel like it's just incredible. Um, I have lots of energy. My digestion is amazing, and I sleep super well. But I am surprised that like I thought the fat would just be like falling off. And what's interesting is that when I did the Coke diet, I lost weight like crazy. And I think there's something about like it being pure sugar as opposed to even like a whole food, like a fruit or anything like that, and then the caffeine element combined where I thought like it wouldn't be as fast as Coke diet, but I'd still be losing like substantial amount of weight. I'm wondering, why my weight loss is perhaps so slow. It's kind of like I went like a couple weeks sort of like staying even, and then I'm kind of maybe losing like a pound a week, which I mean is still like that's like traditional diet like weight loss kind of a thing. Um, but you'd think if you're sort of like tapping into some kind of a deeper mechanism that it's something that would be coming off a lot more. Though, like, I have to say, like, I've uh I've had like cheat meals, and so maybe like those things are just like absolutely ruining it. I don't know. In my head, it's like I thought that it would still be so effective that it would be able to like withstand like you feel like you're creating like not necessarily like a deficit of sorts, but you're getting so much fat loss on the days where everything is like totally on point that it would make up for that. But I don't know, maybe it's just like some people say that they gain weight like X fat loss, he's like, well, I'm just gaining weight on the honey diet.
well, yeah, he actually did a DEXA before and after, and he did not lose or gain any fat, but he gained like 6 pounds of water weight.
Right. Well, just yesterday he commented on one of my things that he said like I think he went from honey diet to like a nearly pure carb diet, and then it's actually only then he started gaining fat. I'd have to
Hmm.
look back. It was something he tweeted at me last night. Um, but the nutrition by Victoria. She's like a vegan YouTuber, and she follows like the durian rider high sugar diet, and she got into cycling and everything like that. She said that like she came from very restrictive dieting, And due to all the metabolic damage and insulin resistance she had, she actually gained like 60 pounds on this like, high carb, high sugar vegan diet, and then lost it all and now has like small waist and flat belly and stuff. So like, do you think there's some kind of like metabolic recovery stage? Like it depends on where someone's coming from. Or is it just that some people process it differently? Like, what do you really think's going on there?
You know, um, I don't know why there would be like that change. I think like there's like some subtle things that happen sometimes with, especially digestion. I think some of the people who have had worse results on the honey diet have like overdid mangoes, and then mangoes for a lot of people just like make them super bloated, and they don't have any like you know bowel movements in a day.
I did so many dried mangoes at the start of this like recent endeavor, like a few months, like a month or two ago, whatever it was. Like minimum like 1,000 calories a day of just dried mangoes.
Mhm.
Um, and what was interesting is I noticed depending on the brand I chose, one of them would make me like uncomfortably bloated, and then afterwards I'd be fine. And other ones didn't. But regardless, whatever dried mangoes I eat, like you really like you see it on the back end. Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean with like a lot of fruitarians, it seems like they have like 10 bowel movements in a day. So who knows if there's like even this like metabolic effect? Maybe they're just like not absorbing any of the calories because they're just immediately getting rid of all of it through their bowels.
yeah,
um, yeah. So I mean, like, and I think like on that time scale, like a 6 month or however long, I don't know how long you said, but 60 pounds and then losing 60 pounds again. I'm sure that happened over like a while. Uh, that sounds like long enough for maybe like gut adaptations, but I feel like metabolic adaptations happen like pretty fast. There have been studies where people start overfeeding uh, men with carbs, and they'll gain fat at the start, right? Because or just like during the whole time because they overfed them with like a normal high protein diet, and then gave them, a few extra 1,000 calories of carbs throughout the day. But then they measured their metabolic rate over the entire period. And over the, couple weeks as they did the study, every day their metabolism would increase by like 100 calories. So it seems like the metabolic adaptations like happen on the scale of like days to weeks. Um, yeah. But like, I don't know if it's, 60 pounds is a pretty big fluctuation.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely possible that like the body has to work, especially like if you've come from super restrictive diets, if you've come from metabolic damage and adaptive thermogenesis, and you've created a bunch of insulin resistance, that your body like has to kind of relearn how to process glucose correctly. Um, and one of the things I posted a few days ago, like the Charles Poliquin biosignature thing, and for him, he what he did was he said that where fat accumulates on the body corresponds with certain hormones, either too much of a hormone or not enough of a hormone. And according to him, cortisol, belly fat was from cortisol, so that's like on the front of the belly, around the belly button, and then love handles were insulin resistance. And one of the things that these high carb vegans talk about is how the diet, this specific, basically like a pure carb diet of sorts, is the way to get cortisol and insulin under control. Um, and so there's okay, so sugar brings down cortisol, um, and then I guess uh, uh, fat and protein create more insulin resistance than sugar does, than carbs do. And so basically a pure carb diet is the best way to bring down insulin resistance. And one thing I will say is that, I've experimented with carnivore, and uh, I had like the flattest stomach I ever had on carnivore. And I think that was predominantly due to the digestive relief. But like, I think there was also perhaps like a visceral fat reduction that happened there, and just kind of general fat around the waist. But one thing I've noticed is like a lot of various carnivore influencers, they kind of have this like generally fit physique that kind of gets developed. Like I had a tweet that had said, no matter what your starting point, the carnivore diet will turn you into like a fit looking middle aged person.
Mhm.
You know, it kind of like ages you a little bit. People like they kind of get a little bit redder. I don't know if that's they spend more time in the sun, but a lot of the best or most uh, notable carnivore influencers, the one who are still on a traditional carnivore diet, they have a good amount of musculature and they tend to be lean, but I noticed they don't quite have like as tight of a waist as these like high carb vegans do. And for me, like even when I was like close to 10% body fat and shredded and jacked, like in the best shape of my life, and I mean I looked great. It always just felt like, why am I holding this like fat around my love handles and my belly just like more? And it wasn't like, oh, you're just like being nitpicky that there's like fat somewhere in your body. It's just like, no, it just felt like it's like weirdly concentrated here. And for some people, like they just don't have that problem. And so I wonder, like, you know, again, like there's something well, the reason why I brought up the cortisol specifically is that, you know, the high carb vegans are anti caffeine. They, you know, durian riders kind of would say like to only use it as like a performance enhancer, like when you are like cycling or something. Um, but you know, have you seen that like Cole Robinson, the snake diet guy, is now doing his like sugar
Mhm.
diet, which I mean, he might have like totally kind of just gotten from you, because it's like the closest thing I've ever seen to exactly what you're talking about from any like prominent person, not directly like in our circles.
Yeah, he'll yell at you and say sugar cures cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, so it was he's basically his diet is like exactly like yours. Um but he's like more adamant about uh restricting the dinner. Like he's like, you don't even need that much protein. Like, you know, you can bring it down because if you eat less protein, it's easier to cut your fat out more. And he's like, your goal is weight loss. If you get a little bit skinnier but you get shredded, like you're gonna be that upset? Probably not. Um but you know, it seems like there's this like, and this is just kind of what I've been gravitating towards, where it's like, you know, if your approach to the honey diet is, you know, um, eating all your sugars throughout the day and then eating protein for dinner. And well, yeah, first off, like, you know, do you think that like the FGF21 um, stimulation, like it can be very effectively activated by just kind of dividing the day like that? Or does it need like, you know, how much time do you need to restrict the protein and have the abundance of carbs to really get the FGF21 going?
Yeah. I mean, I've had a couple blood tests where I'll have like a big protein dinner 10 hours before the blood test, and then one is like 14 hours. And my insulin is always like a lot lower, by like when it's like the full fasting period. And then there's like some like slight insulin being raised, like not anywhere near pre-diabetic, but just like a little bit higher when it's like the 10 hours. Like I really think you can have that kind of reset. um I think like the vegans probably have like more chronic FGF21 activation, right? Because I'm definitely turning it off for at least 12 hours out of the day, whereas they can constantly have it going.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I wonder, like, you know, so many, I had a thread about this the other day with like various cyclical diets or diets where you separate macronutrients. And again, coming from the more paleo side of things, and it was like carbs aren't, you know, as good for you. It was like you'd eat a keto diet and then you would have this massive carb refeed. And when you would do the carb refeed, you would try to keep fat down as much as possible. And this was sort of like a recognition that not eating carbs slows your metabolism and you lower your thyroid production. And so you need this like giant feast of carbs to like stimulate everything going again. Um, and so then, you know, I've kind of been like, for some time now thinking like, okay, so, you know, what if you kind of eat like, uh, maybe not the honey diet, but like a kind of, maybe like a peat inspired diet, but like a high carb, moderate protein, low fat diet. And you could bring fat down as much as possible for, you know, days at a time, even like a week at a time, or maybe even more, however long you feel like you can go. and that way you're sort of maximizing the fat loss. And then, well, you want your fat soluble vitamins, you want your cholesterol, and get some fat into the system, and then you have like a fat refeed kind of thing. But now, like, I just based on, like, if fat loss is specifically the interest of somebody, and I think it's the interest of a lot of people, could they do basically a multi-day, week-long pure carb diet, so to speak, and then do like a protein refeed? You mentioned in studies where longevity studies where protein deficiencies, seem to increase mortality. And I'm wondering, like, could a big bolus of protein sort of solve one, if that could just solve all the problems, and two, I also wonder if the types of diets that those people were on were like sufficient, like still really high carb diets, like they were still getting tons of nutrition from
Mhm.
sugars and starch and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's definitely possible that the people on the low protein diet just had like a really terrible diet quality. And there have been animal studies where, I mean, it's mice, of course, but the mice will uh, have been put on a low protein diet for their entire life, and they live like 30% longer, right? So it's like definitely not settled that a low protein diet is bad for humans. But on the side of caution, like it it's like oftentimes I think better to be in the lower risk category rather than the higher risk category, unless you have like a really good reason to be in the higher risk category. Um, but I definitely think like if fat loss is your goal, I mean, you can tolerate really anything. Like you can tolerate, I mean, sure, like not eating any food at all will give you a much higher mortality than any diet, because you'll just die of starvation eventually, right? So like, but you can just like fast for a couple of weeks and surely lose a lot of weight. And if that's your goal, then might as well you could do it. And there have been studies, like in animals at least, where they were given a zero protein diet for like a couple weeks in mice, but like normal sugar, normal fat, but just zero protein. And these animals lost like a huge percentage of their body fat, but like maintained almost all of their lean mass,
And
which
and
is
what
pretty crazy.
and how was the diet set up?
No protein at all, zero protein.
And
And it was like, and then they had like a 1%, 2%, 5% protein diet in different groups. And the ones that had any protein at all had some of the weight loss blunted. But basically, every group maintained their lean mass,
and the rest of the diet, was it pure carbs or it was mixed carbs and fat?
mixed carbs and fat.
Oh, okay. So then, like, now we're going back to the kind of ice cream diet thing. Like, maybe there's um
Maybe ice cream has too much protein though.
no, that's true. And that's why it's like, you know um I've long since had this idea that I think a lot of the people who do the best on the most restrictive diets do so because they don't adhere to them. So, um, I don't know if I've told this story before, but when I was in college, the guy the one of the coaches at my CrossFit gym, it's like a high level CrossFit competitor. He was like 5'4", 5'5", and but he was like so jacked. Like he was built like a Ninja Turtle. His quads were massive. He could squat like 405 for 20. He was an absolute freak. And I had kind of just been like eating a just general bodybuilding diet. It's like you eat your chicken and rice. I mean, I was in college, so I was still eating like all whatever stuff, but you eat like chicken and rice, and I was young and I was in good shape and stuff. And it was like, no, actually, here's paleo, and carbs are just like, if you just don't eat carbs, like some sort of magic happens. And but it was just like, if you just don't eat carbs and you just can eat all the protein and fat that you want. And he would kind of talk about just eating like tons of like bison and steaks and um burger patties, and it was like, I mean, not like quite literally carnivore, but a lot of heavy meat and stuff. And then it's funny because like then I'd found out that like every like Friday night at least he would eat like a whole entire large pizza, um and he would regularly eat an entire jar of nut butter every day. And it's like, I did the math, and it was like there's still like 150 to 200 grams of carbs in like that nut butter. And so it's like he thinks he's doing a diet, but he's not.
Mhm.
And because he's not actually doing it, it's working, because he was, young, a competitive athlete, burning a bunch of calories, working out all day. Um, and so like you see this with like lots of low carb people is, they like, because it's not a moral thing like veganism.
Mhm.
Um, a vegan, there's like the kind of thing where like a vegan like would get drunk and then like go eat like a cheeseburger or something. Um, but so many vegans are like, it's such a moral issue that like there's no like, if they want to cheat, they'll just eat like vegan junk food.
Mhm.
But especially with like low carb type people, and I mean, I have never in my life experienced a craving and like an uncontrollable craving like when I was carnivore. And I did like what I would consider to be like very well on carnivore. I mean, I did it like um you know fairly strict for 6 months, but like every so often it was like I really need to eat some carbs. And one night in particular, I kind of just like I freaked out, and I like raided my entire kitchen for every last thing that had a carbohydrate in it. I ate 2 whole containers of Greek yogurt. I ate a whole bag of almonds. I ate like a bag of chocolate covered nuts, and it wasn't enough. And so I lived like a 5 minute walk from Whole Foods. I went to Whole Foods. I got like I think like a box of cereal. I ate an entire thing of chocolate chip cookie dough, and I just like couldn't stop eating. And I ate like 8,000 calories. Um, and it's like uh first off, like what an insane signal that the body's like, dude, we need carbs, we need carbs, we need carbs. And it's like I do that, and then I would just like go back to my carnivore, and I was like, I feel pretty great. Like, but like, the carbs were keeping me afloat. And then so at some point I was like, okay, this isn't working. And so I added raw goat milk and honey. And again, what's funny is that like in that iteration of my diet, I still found it much easier to go, oh, I'm going to have like raw milk and honey and maybe egg throughout the day. And then I'm going to eat my meat at night. And so there's something about like the heaviness of the food, the macronutrient
Mhm.
composition of the food, the fact if it's liquid or solid, that I think kind of has to do with the digestive component that, creates the energy. Um, and then, I kind of started to feel a lot better. And then at a certain point, I just like, I still need more carbs. I started eating fruit. I started eating starch. Um, but yeah, this like cheating on the diet seems to not in a lot of cases not like undo the diet, but like actually make it better. And so what's interesting with kind of the way these different hormones work is, maybe there are these magic thresholds which if you don't reach, yet we kind of we call it that swampland thing that Denise Minger came up with. But it seems like a lot of metabolic functions and what the body does, like they only happen in the swampland. And so, you do a diet and you eat so much protein and fat and carbs, and you use calorie deficit to lose weight, and then you start to lose muscle. Maybe like if you don't eat like an abundance of protein, and perhaps it's because your body hasn't switched on these, muscle sparing protective hormones that like you only get at the extremes. And so, when it comes, I mean, again, do not support veganism at all, but on the basically what we would consider to be the vegan side of things, because that's just where people, again, it's very rare for a non-vegan to eat that like 80-10-10, at least 80% of your calories from carbohydrate diet. um you have this somewhat muscle sparing effect, but again, it requires you to eat enough sugar and carbohydrate, which I really only think some of these extreme people that are considered extreme in the vegan world, like a durian rider or the other people that he's inspired. But then on the other side, it's like, the most people who do a low carb diet or like think they're doing a ketogenic diet don't test their ketone levels. And I don't know if necessarily you need to do that, but like a lot of them would say, oh, you need to eat more fat. And then I know so many, I was in a carnivore Facebook group, and a lot of like former carnivores say like I try to eat more fat and I just got fatter. But again, you always wonder like, did they actually adhere to it to the point that they got to that metabolic function. Because when I did carnivore, I was just eating like ribeyes and ground meat, which is like 65% fat, maybe at the most a 70% fat diet. And so if you get too much protein, you totally prevent whatever this like threshold of some kind of hormonal downstream effects. And so like, yeah, there's like the cheating, which saves you unless, you go to like the threshold, if that makes sense, like what I'm kind of trying to say.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes sense. Um, yeah, it seems like it seems like there's this like pretty consistent, just back to a previous point, path that people take from they go carnivore and then their body just like gives up, and they for some reason need carbs, and then they go to something that's like Paul Saladino's diet, which is they add back like a little bit of fruit or honey, and then they end up trying to live in the real world because they can't move to Costa Rica and only eat like fruits and honey all day and stay out in the sun, and then they go to repeat and start to have like candy. um, yeah, so no, like I definitely think that oh yeah, so people on carnivore who eat more fat and then get fatter, like carnivore is like a really dirty diet space because some people are just like eating buckets of bacon fat, and then once they add any like other carbs back in, they're basically eating seed oils. And no matter what you eat, if you're eating a mixed macro diet and you have like a ton of seed oils, like you're probably not going to stay skinny. But maybe somebody who's like kind of cheating and eating like a little bit of honey, but overall eating like a nearly keto diet with the with beef, but they have carbs every once in a while, like maybe that cheating will help them just stay on this diet that works for them long term. uh yeah, so like, yeah, maybe I'm like surprised that your coach was able to eat like jars of nut butter and stay like healthy and
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind that let's see, I think I was like 21 at the time and he was maybe 24 or 25 or something like that. So he was really young. And he, I mean, look, CrossFitters do an insane volume of training and activity. I know this guy, like previously he had been like a competitive mountain biker, and he went out for the Olympics in like not luge, but like skeleton, where you just like go headfirst down the thing. Whatever that one's called. And so like you're talking about a very high level athlete who's burning an insane amount of calories. And so um, it's it seems like, you kind of either have this thing where because people, if like you've been on David Gornowski's
mhm,
podcast. When I was on his show, one of the things he said is like, why do we need to eat these like crazy diets just to not be fat? Like, it
mhm.
seems like that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, I mean, in our history, we didn't eat like this, and we weren't fat. And we could talk about seed oils and all kinds of other modern pollutants. Um, but there's still plenty of people around who just kind of eat like, I mean, they might pay some attention, they eat like vaguely whatever, and they stay. And it seems like there's kind of like two kinds of people. There's the people who are like athletes, and perhaps they are like just kind of burning off whatever it is that they're eating anyways, and they're using their body as stimulating their metabolism, giving their glucose somewhere to go. And maybe or maybe not, they like restrict their intake to maintain a certain weight. Probably when they're younger, they probably don't do that, and then maybe when they get older they do. But then there are people who are just like naturally healthy. I'm sorry, naturally thin. I don't know if they're healthy, but they're just naturally thin. And something about their metabolic function, and I don't know, like, can you just reduce it down to thyroid? Like, if they're not getting an FGF21 situation going, like, what is it that a naturally thin person has, like specifically thin? And maybe they might be an active person, but they're not like an athlete who's clearly burning it off. But like one of my closest friends is about to turn 60. He's been a family friend like my whole life. He's about to turn 60, and he looks, I think I met him when I was like 2 years old. He looks exactly the same. And he's like, like legitimately like 6% body fat. and I think he's like 5'8", and he weighs like 140, 145 pounds. And this dude eats so much food. He eats and he just eats whatever he wants. He eats, nice dinners. He eats junk food. He eats whatever. He just, and he, like, he might like go for a run on the beach, and like, I've seen him lift weights. He's been lifting the same weights. He uses dumbbells just basically to stay like active. But there's something going on with this guy that just allows him to just like literally, he has like zero fat on his body. It's actually just mind blowing. And I don't know, like, is his thyroid like what, like, yeah, like, do you have any idea what the explanation is for someone who's just like metabolically so like effective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be hard to say it's like just thyroid because, I mean, even if you supplement thyroid, like whenever I supplemented a ton of T3, I just gained weight. I only gained fat because it made me just hungrier than uh, than the metabolic rate increase. And it's like it's hard. I wonder if you gave them like a couple generations of bad eating, then their kids and kids' would eventually be fat, even with like the same genes. Um, I was like definitely kind of like naturally skinny for like a long time in my life, and could eat junk food, and I would be unhealthy. I would have like terrible migraines, but I wouldn't get fat. And then I think the KFC month or 2 months just like broke me. And then after that, no matter like what I ate, even like super healthy diet, it just like became a struggle to not continually gain weight. And now I have to do like some sort of extreme diet to like not gain weight. Even like, I mean, that was like many years ago, and still it's like have to be very conscious to like not gain weight. So yeah, I'm not sure if there's like some switch that they never have turned off. They never just like poison themselves, and everybody else has, or you know, and there are these things where you can give a diet to an animal, and it makes them like a little bit fat, but then their children have some. There's like epigenetic changes that get passed off to their children, and then like on a similar diet, their children can get even fatter, and like maybe the Americans, like right when seed oils were coming out, were somewhat resistant to these high seed oil diets and didn't immediately break their metabolism. But now we've had like many generations of exposure, and all of our parents have had these like metabolic stress signals passed down to us iteratively, and now it's just like much harder.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree that there's like a multi-generational thing that would happen, like, but what I wonder is for the person that is metabolically healthy, like, I wonder how well we can define that. I mean, of course, like some things are just immeasurable. Um, but like, what is it that like denotes someone who's in that like metabolic state? And then, if we can understand that, like, how can we try to achieve that? Whether it be through, diet or perhaps even medication or pharmaceuticals or something. It's like,
Right.
okay, if someone has a thyroid issue, well, thyroid supplementation is well studied and it's a very effective process. But it's like, yeah, I wonder, like, okay, so my friend who's like 60 and just like, has the exact same body that he did when he was like 17 years old. Um, like what does he have going on, and how can we try to get there? Um, and it's interesting that it's like, yeah, you have these, again, I keep coming back to, like, there's these two extremes of diet, and it seems like some people do better on more of the keto thing, some people do better on the high carb low fat thing. And so then you wonder, like, is that just like a purely genetic thing? I know that that maybe wouldn't
Mhm.
align so much with the Pete ideology, but like, I mean, there are things like blood type diets, and who knows if there's any merit to them. They've been like quote unquote like debunked, but like, the same people that debunk those would call like Ray Pete a cholesterol denialist or whatever nonsense.
Right.
Um, and what's interesting is, like, I'm uh, when it comes to this kind of stuff, I'm just like, man, whatever works. Like, I don't really care, and I'll try
Mhm.
anything, whatever like calls to me, I'll try it. It's like, again, don't support veganism at all. I'm not a vegan. I don't want anyone to be a vegan, but it's like, if I just need to eat a pure carb diet for like 5 days at a time, and then I can like eat a bunch of like animal foods on the weekends, and that makes me like feel the best. I'm not a vegan. I still get to eat a bunch of great foods. Like whatever's healthy, like, you know, whatever makes you feel good, that's fine. Um, and so yeah, I wonder like uh are some people just made to do better in one than the other, or like is the way that glucose metabolism works so necessary that like everyone would be their best towards the carb side of things,
Mhm.
but maybe the fat side, the keto side, is a step up from where they were before, or maybe they're so screwed up that like their glucose metabolism can't be repaired, and so they kind of just have to sit in keto, and then you know, they can't go over to the carb side, but if they could, they should. And so, you know, these
Yeah.
are the kind of things that I think about. And but then like, you know, I there's this guy that I see for like body work, like massage therapist, and he works like on athletes and stuff. He works out of a CrossFit gym, and he used to be a bodybuilder, and he's this really cool Italian guy. Um, and the first time I walked into his office for the first time I got work done from him, he asked me what my blood type was. And so, of course, I'm like the person like, well, what do you think that I am? Because I'm just like, you know, let's see what's going on here. And he said, you look like an O, but you act like an A. And I had heard of the blood type diet before. I was like actually somewhat familiar with it because like, you know, all you have to do is talk to one crazy person who's into it, and now you're like, now I know too much about this thing. And what's funny is, you know, I am type A, but if people know anything about blood types, you still have the two sides of it. So I'm an AO as opposed to like you could be an AA. So whenever someone like spots me like that, I'm like, okay, there's obviously something here. Like, what are you kind of picking up on? Um, and so yeah, I guess like, you know, part of the structure that I have gives off some O thing, and then part of my behavior, I guess, gives off some A thing. But the type A diet is like basically the vegan diet. And he's type A and he's vegan. And I mean, this guy is like still plenty jacked. I mean, I'm assuming he used steroids when he was bodybuilding. I don't know if he still uses TRT. Um, but like, and I've talked to other people who are type A, and who have like experimented with diet to like this degree, and they're like, yeah, I mean, I don't like believe in veganism, and I'm not a vegan, but like I tend towards the high carb, low fat things, and then most of my animal products are like fish and seafood. And so yeah, I wonder like how much of this is with what side of the spectrum, like kind of people assuming like a broken metabolic system, right? Like modern world, we're all screwed up for some extent, at least those of us who are. It's like you kind of have to pick one. And I wonder, um, are they both like just as valuable and just as like warranted? Or do we kind of think that like the human body and the way that metabolism works, like still generally trends like in one direction, you know?
Yeah. So, so I think the way I think about this generally is that there was this triangle chart that X Fat Loss posted,
Yeah.
where
That
you
one.
know on the top, so each corner of the triangle there's a macro. So bottom left is carbs, top is protein, bottom right is fat. And as you get closer to each end of the triangle, you deprive the other two nutrients. So, like if you're at the point you're 100% protein, or 100% carb, or 100% fat, and then anywhere inside of the triangle, you're some combination of those. And you can kind of draw a line halfway through the triangle and say, okay, above this, you just get rabbit starvation. You get like protein toxicity. That's too much protein. So then anywhere where you are below this line, you have some mix of fat, carbs, and protein. And then this is like the diet realm where you can just survive. And once you get close enough to the carb side and close enough to the fat side where you have, yeah, where you're in kind of carbosis or ketosis, or low fat or low carb, and below a certain threshold of protein, then those diets seem viable for not gaining a ton of fat. And I think what genetics and what epigenetics do is it just like shifts the threshold at which it becomes a viable diet. So like some people probably can tolerate like a higher fat, higher protein, higher carb diet than others. But I think anybody, once you get all the way into like 100% carb diet, 100% fat diet with no protein, none of the other macro, you're going to lose weight. It's just like how extreme do you need to be is what I think like all of these factors really are contributing to. And like if there's some bias towards carbs or fat, then that also just changes the threshold. But I think even the most carbs biased person, unless you have some crazy genetic phenotype which completely disallows you from metabolizing fat, like I think the most carb biased person could still succeed on a keto diet. They just like might not like it because it'll be too extreme, too extreme. Um,
Yeah, I think this idea is kind of like this way of looking at it is really like kind of where um, the future of diet construction is. And again, it's like everyone in the diet, like the traditional diet world, is just like just calories in, calories out. If you want to lose weight, you just like restrict your calories. But it's like like that doesn't really make any sense as like a way to live. Like to expect people to have to like measure type of it's it doesn't make sense. It's like it's a tool, and we know that it works, but for how long and to what extent, and then
mhm.
like what kind of negative effects and stuff. And it's like there's something that I feel like can only be had with a diet that is constrained in some way, but you kind of get to eat like ad libitum. You can just eat as much as you want. um, and what's interesting about this triangle is that like the vast majority of these diets, I mean, obviously, like he selected if only so many of them are in this like carb low fat side. Um, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's
and
just
it's
go
kind
ahead.
of funny. Like on this chart, like the low carb area that's not considered to be in the metabolic swamp is bigger than the low fat area. That's probably like his individual variation as well, or like maybe the bias against high
Yeah,
carb
but
diets.
notice how there's nothing in the low fat area. It's totally empty. You have these.
Low
I'm
carb.
not sure which diets, but there's two diets which are on the border. They're both
Mhm.
at 80% fat. There's literally nothing in the low carb, and it's like
Yeah,
that's the thing where it's like there's something about various thresholds, which and what's so funny is that like I sort of led myself to believe that that keto had this like magic effect once you like got into keto hard enough. But of course I like didn't restrict my protein, and so I probably wasn't restricting my protein enough and getting enough fat to tap into that thing. But also like it feels like shit and you want to cheat on it. Um, and so it doesn't seem like that's another thing I wondered too, which is like, okay, what it would be better to do, to eat a keto diet that you cheat on or eat a carbo diet that you cheat on?
yeah. I mean, my opinion is carbo diet that you cheat on because you don't have to have the huge water weight fluctuations. Like everybody who starts keto has to have like a week or whatever of keto flu, is what people say. I mean, it's not the case for everybody, but with the going on and off the high carb diets, it doesn't seem like you have that.
Yeah, and that's like, because my concern is more than just like whatever works, and so there's if something works and you have to be super strict, that's fine, but you just need to know that that's how it works. And if something works and is also flexible, then you could argue that it works better, because what you're talking about when it comes to diet is what are you kind of what are you recommending to people? What are you getting the population at large? If you were a coach and you had clients, what is going to work most of the time? If you're giving recommendations to a broad audience, like what is going to be a more effective diet across the board and what's sustainable? And I just recorded a video, just like a little selfie video today that I'm going to post later. But it was kind of like I've basically identified that currently I kind of have like 5 different types of days of ways that I eat, and they all follow a honey diet structure. Um, and so all of those days are like pure sugar, until the afternoon. Fruit and juice and whatever like that, for the most part. Maybe there's starch, but like they're without a doubt like full carb. And then I have like my total carb days, which are effectively like a vegan day, though I might do like noodles and bone broth, and I just eat nothing but carbs. And then I have the day that I eat a lean protein and starch. So like shrimp or like a
Mhm.
wild game like elk or venison or lean fish or something like that, and like rice or potatoes, and cooked in as little to no fat as possible. And then I have a day which is like kind of like the way you laid it out, which is more like a fattier meat. And then I, perhaps some like low starch veggies or just like a pure carnivore dinner. And I use that as like I want a big fat steak today. And I'm sort of get my cravings and I get my fat and all that. And then I have a day which is instead of a dinner, I just drink milk. So I'll just drink like raw goat milk in the afternoon and like through nighttime, and that's what I consume for the rest of the day. And then I have my cheat day, and it's still honey diet, and then I just go out to dinner and like eat whatever. Um, and it's just kind of like what works, because you still want to go out with family, you want to go out and go to a party or go to an event and enjoy a nice restaurant. Um, and what I can say is that I find this all very sustainable. I still feel like I maintain all the benefits of how good I feel. I have so much energy every day. My sleep is like, this is the thing that is more different than anything else for me, is I always struggle with sleeping. And now I just like, I wake up and I have like, I used to have to drag myself out of bed. I just wake up and I'm like up, and I go have some kind of sugar, and then I'm just like have energy all day. Um, but like I said, like I thought more that the fat would just be like falling off, and it's like it is tracking down slowly. And so I'm not doing any kind of like extensive measurements. I just weigh myself in the mornings. Maybe I'm losing muscle, maybe I'm not. I'm still like a muscular guy, so I don't know. Like nothing's really jumped out at me, but like if this is a structure that like everyone can do, and like over time they would just like settle towards a healthy weight, like I don't know, you might have like come up with something like truly incredible here. um but there's the thing too, which is like, and you've heard a lot of people who've tried this online, where they'll say and I feel like you've said this too, where you actually just have the energy to like, I want to go out and do stuff now. Like you have the sugar precedes the energy, and then you're like, I need to go for a walk, I want to go work out. Like it's actually driving you towards a more energetic and healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, and protein makes you tired. I don't think people realize how tired protein protein can make you.
Yeah, well, it's one of my buddies who I used to work out with all the time. I remember I was like eating beef sometime like in the afternoon or something for lunch, and he's like, oh man, that's a nighttime meat, that's a nighttime meat. And like I knew what he meant, and like I already agree, it's just kind of like what I had. um but that's the thing that's like really interesting, is like I'm always looking for patterns of like how many things keep coming up and reinforcing the same idea over time. And uh but what's interesting is like on carnivore I could eat meat and not feel heavy. Like I don't know, maybe your body just like gets so good when you're just eating nothing but beef. Your body gets so good at breaking it down. Maybe it's because I'm dumping so much salt all over it that it helps strengthen your stomach acid. um but like more than anything, it's just like, yeah, if I have meat for dinner, I feel fine. But eating protein throughout it really is like, I've noticed dairy doesn't seem to do it. um and it do you know how much dairy still, like, would it still prevent um FGF21 from being released?
It definitely would. And personally, I experience like if I eat enough dairy, just milk protein, then I do lose the energy. But like a latte or a couple lattes isn't going to do it. It's more like with beef, I'm like can put down like 100 grams of protein like really fast, and then I'm just tired the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But with like milk, I'm usually only having like 16 grams of protein total, because I'm having like a glass.
And so what you would you say like that much is because there's a couple things, right? It's like um because I know I can have like a substantial, a full glass of especially goat milk, and still feel like plenty energetic. But the question would be like, is that energy purely an FGF21 thing? And if I still have the energy, does that mean that my body is still producing FGF21, or are those like potentially like you could still have the energy, but the FGF21's turned off, and so maybe the fat loss has slowed down?
Yeah, I'm sure there's like some sort of decoupling. I mean, just yeah, if you think about the extremes, you can suppress FGF21 all you want with like plenty of protein, and yet some people still have like a lot of energy. Um, even eating a lot of protein. So like, no, I definitely think that like even just like that little bit of milk will probably suppress FGF21 enough to reduce the fat loss if you're going for the extreme fat loss. Um, and the FGF21 like is definitely suppressed by even moderate amounts of protein. And so yeah, like the energy like is most likely from not just that.
Okay, that's interesting. So, like, would you mind sort of? I feel like we kind of skipped over this, like, just breaking down, and we kind of went over how to like get your body to start, upregulating FGF21.
Mhm.
Can you kind of break down like all the effects that it has? Like, I know like insulin sensitivity and other kind of stuff like that, just so people know like what it does.
Yeah, so I mean, generally it increases the metabolic rate. There have been studies where they genetically modify mice to have more FGF21 expressed, and they live like 30% longer, which people have said explains the protein restriction lifespan increases in these animals. It what you feel generally from it is like aversion to sweets. So like if you eat a ton of sugar and then you get some sort of satiety where you might even still be hungry, but you're just like, oh, I'm like kind of sick of sweets. Like that is a good sign that you're inducing FGF21. And some
So,
people
like,
don't have that.
would that then like suggest that like you should eat as much sugar as you can to get to the point where your body's like rejecting it, and that would be like you're
Yes.
getting okay. So then you should purposefully like Cole Robinson calls it, like a sugar bomb. You should just eat as much sugar as you can first thing in the morning until you get sick, basically.
Pretty much.
Interesting.
But let me like there's a caveat there. I mean, there are some people with genetic polymorphisms in uh, FGF21 and that are mutations basically that they do not get this sweet aversion, and then you'll just like keep eating, and then you'll have too much and start to gain weight. So like if you just like can eat unlimited sugar and you never start to feel like sweet sick, then that might be a sign that you have a mutation in FGF21.
Huh. What's really funny is yeah, like like you said, it's like coming up on a year since you've kind of like that you said anything about the honey diet online. Is that about right?
I think it's just been a little bit more than a year, but yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So for the past like couple years, because when I was a healthy athlete and all that kind of stuff, like I was very easy for me to manipulate my weight. I would just cut my calories back, usually from fat, and then gain weight, and I was no real problems. Like I was generally pretty lean all the time. Sometimes I would do like a pretty extreme bulk, and then I would cut right back down. And the last like before carnivore, the last like um sort of way I was eating diet I was sort of doing was kind of what I was saying, where I would just like eat yogurt and oatmeal in the morning and some fruit, and then like have orange juice while I train, and then go have an acai bowl, and then usually eat like a bunch of meat and rice for dinner. And that was working so well. I just started getting like leaner and leaner and leaner, and of course I was still tracking my macros and keeping them in check of sorts. But I was cutting on at least 3,500 calories a day most days. um I was always someone who like just didn't bother tracking like oil, in the sense that like it's just like, why bother if my weight isn't going down, then I'm just dropping my calories even further, because like you eat out, or it's hard to measure, whatever. So it was probably like substantially a few hundred calories a day higher. and my carbs kept going up. I just kind of like instinctually, without any real purpose, not like someone was telling me to do this or I was reading it, I started just cranking my carbs and cranking my carbs. And I was getting to like above 500 grams of carbs a day on like a very mixed diet, 200 grams of protein, at least probably 60 to 80 grams of fat most days. And that's the leanest I've ever been. I was just like lean as hell, and I was strongest I've ever been. And it was like phenomenal. Um, and so like there's something about, like, I remember feeling this all, like I felt like I was burning too hot, and that's why I decided to go carnivore in the first place, was because I was just like, I feel overwhelmed. I need to like slow down. And this, I was still eating like a mixed diet, but I felt so like almost overwhelmed. I was like, and at some point I think my digestion was kind of getting hit, maybe because it was like too varied, and I was eating a lot of non-fat Greek yogurt and a lot of oatmeal, and mixed dinner, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint what it was. But like I said, like then after that I did carnivore, and then I did the primal diet, and I got fat on the primal diet, which is like the raw everything diet. I was eating whole sticks of butter, and I was just like, you're kind of told to like purposely get fat on the diet, you'll like heal faster. And unfortunately, like I kind of, once that happened and then I got really sick, all of a sudden I sort of like set myself up to like be fatter, and it's been really hard to lose the weight since then. And so I've tried like various things over the last few years, and I lost like a good chunk of weight, and then I've kind of done like some like yo-yo type of stuff. And I remember I did like I guess this would have been 2023. I did like a super low fat diet. You hadn't said anything about honey diet yet. I wasn't really but I was kind of replicating my old diet, where I would have non-fat Greek yogurt and like a rice cereal and dates. And then I would just drink and I would have a big Coke. I'm sorry, not a big Coke, a big coffee, which like I would do 3 tablespoons of Cafe Bustelo instant espresso, which is like 1,000, like a full gram of caffeine. And I would put a full cup of sugar, whatever like 200 grams of sugar is, either a half cup or a full cup of sugar in my coffee. And then after that I would like drink Coke in like the middle of the day, the afternoon, and then eat like a super like shrimp and rice. And I lost like 20 pounds doing that. And like, mixed food, but like I did not feel any of, maybe because you're mixing it, I didn't feel any aversion to the sweetness. And then when I started trying to do honey diet, I kept hitting like the aversion to sweetness, and so I kept like falling off the diet. And I was so confused. I was like, why? I would try to have sugar first thing in the morning, and I couldn't figure it out. And I'm like, man, my body keeps saying like, don't do that. And I'm like, but I want to have like a light breakfast, and I want to lose weight. I want it to be low fat. And so I was kind of struggling to figure out what to do. And I was talking to a fellow Peter online, and he was mentioning something about like a blood glucose versus blood amino acids. And so if you wake up with a high blood glucose, then your body's going to be resistant to sugar. Like you're going to have that oversweet effect. And then what's funny is I couldn't kind of get out of that. Like, man, I'm really struggling with sugar in the morning. And so I kind of started to settle on like, what was I doing for a while? I was just kind of, dates were a little too sweet. And so I was kind of doing some yogurt for a while, and I was just kind of struggling, figuring out what to have for breakfast. And then I did the Coke diet, and I had no aversion to the Coke, none at all. And when I did the Coke diet, I lost like, it's so funny. I lost like very little weight in the first week. And then like in the next week, I lost like 10 pounds. And,
what exactly were you eating?
What's up?
What exactly were you eating during the day for the Coke diet?
I would drink like 6 to 8 Cokes until dinner, and I would also eat some fruit. I would have like mandarins, or I would drink some orange juice, or I might have some dried mango, or I might eat some like rice cakes, but it was like a pure carb kind of thing. And then at dinner, I would eat like usually like just like meat by itself. It was like a lean carnivore, and then I would drink like more Cokes with dinner.
Hmm.
Um, and something there was that guy who just posted a couple days ago about how like a Coke diet clears some stuff out of the intestines.
Yeah, Bezors. Like,
Yeah, yeah. If you know, like, can you explain any of that? Do you know like what scientifically is going on with what he was saying about Coke clearing things out?
so apparently in some people, especially with like slow digestion, uh, undigested plant matter, or in other cases, hair, or in some cases, pharmaceuticals even can like form these like insoluble, like giant stones in your stomach and digestive system, just like from not being cleared fast enough, and then they crystallize, and then you have like a stone inside of you that's stuck. So then people have tried to treat this, but the most effective thing that doctors apparently use is just Coca Cola, because you can dissolve it with like the phosphoric acid and carbonated, water.
Dude, I'm telling people, like, especially because I probably built up like most of my following talking about like really healthy natural foods and grass-fed meat and raw milk and all that kind of stuff, and it's like I still believe in all that stuff, but it's like I just something is medicinal about Coke. I can't, like, I've been drinking it my whole life, and it always makes me feel better when I do. Um, and that's so funny. And so it's like I wonder if. So the question is like, does Coke still do that if you eat a mixed diet, or you have to drink Coke by itself?
For the clearance of the
Yeah.
Bezors. I think it would do it. Like,
Okay.
they also people did like Coke enemas, in some of
Well,
this.
I mean that makes sense because like you can use Coke to clean any like metal and chrome and all that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah. Well, so okay, like everything that you're saying keeps like making me like think of other stuff. So I'm really liking where this is going. So I when I the Coke diet was like incredible. Like my waist shrunk down really quickly, which was really interesting. Um, and my digestion felt super good. And I was like so hungry. I was so hungry. And like I would keep drinking Coke, but it's like the second I was done with the Coke, I needed another one. And so I wonder
Yeah,
because like it is one of sorry, go ahead.
I also wonder. So, sucrose is just glucose and fructose linked together, and then high fructose corn syrup is glucose and fructose separately. Like, I wonder if them being separate, and I don't know like how fast they dissociate or where exactly metabolically they dissociate. Um, but I wonder if fructose and glucose being separate, like in the gut, can change how it gets absorbed, right? So, like most fruits, even though fruits are, you know, like certain fruits have sucrose, certain ones have like glucose and fructose separately. Yeah, I just like wonder if like the high fructose corn syrup one, where it's like 55% fructose or above, is even better than sucrose, which would be 50-50, because like fructose seems to be driving this like hunger driven uh, metabolic effect that we were talking about, like fructose plus MCT
Well,
being
so
hunger driven, and then stearic acid and glucose being kind of like satiety driven.
did you see man, I don't know if someone posted on the timeline or where, but some guy, some like YouTuber was trying to be like, is Mexican Coke really healthier for you? And he thought he did like a gotcha by testing it and found that there was no sucrose in it and that it was fructose and glucose. Did you see that?
Oh no, I didn't see that.
Okay, so just for people that don't know, the American Coke, regular Coke, has high fructose corn syrup, and the Mexican Coke is made with cane sugar. And so cane sugar is sucrose, and sucrose is 50% glucose, 50% fructose, but they're bonded together. And high fructose corn syrup, the ones that's used in soda, is 55% fructose, 45% glucose, and what they're separate, like they're not like
Right.
bonded. Um, so this YouTuber, was trying to find out whether or not Mexican Coke was really healthier for you. And what he did to do that was to try to measure whether or not it was actually sugar in the Coke. And so he used, whatever kind of chemistry type thing to detect for glucose and fructose. And he found that there was glucose in cane sugar. And, I forget the specifics of it and not a chemist by any means, but basically he determined that it was, instead of sucrose, it was just glucose and fructose in a Mexican Coke. But then another YouTuber who's an actual chemist did it, and he was like, holy shit, this guy was right. Um there's no sucrose in here. It's all glucose and fructose. And then he's like, let me try other cane sugar sodas. And he's like, the same thing. What's going on here? Are they all lying? And then he decided to make it himself, and the same thing happened. And so I'm pretty sure it was the phosphoric acid, but basically, once you mix the Coke, when Coke gets made, all the other ingredients in the Coke split up the glucose and fructose anyways. So cane sugar Coke is also, it's basically, I guess, would you call that like invert sugar? Like it's just like
Yeah.
separated sugar.
Interesting.
Yeah. So what I will say is not to hate on the Mexican Coke, but like one, I get this stimulus way better with regular Coke. And like for instance, if I drink a Mexican Coke, like I usually want to stop after I'm done with the bottle. If I drink a regular Coke, I want another one. Like I literally I want another one. And I find it tastes better. I mean, like the something about the flavor of it or the texture or whatever kind of the experience of drinking it is, the regular Coke is more desirable. And it becomes like, again, like it creates, I want another one. So it's almost like it's promoting its own craving, and it almost like literally becomes insatiable. Versus, like I said, if I have a Mexican Coke, like I'm just like, I'm good after that point. And so I wonder, like there's this, maybe it would work all the same with Mexican Coke, but there's some kind of stimulation that's happening. I don't know what it's doing. The metabolism, like you said, like they studied it, both the caffeine and the sugar have an effect here, and maybe in conjunction they work even greater. And maybe, like lately I have so much energy, and I've really just been trying to like prioritize my sleep over anything, that I just like decided to cut out caffeine for the most part, just like as like a experiment. Um, but I wonder, like, if in conjunction, like that's where the fat loss really speeds up, and maybe I don't know if caffeine promotes FGF21 in some way, or maybe there's another hormone. But what's interesting is there's people might ask, like, why did I stop doing like Coke diet the way it was? And one is that I got sick. Like I went to the inauguration where and everyone got the flu. And so I got like sick, and I was like sick for like a whole month straight, or like on and off. And it was absolutely miserable. Like I kept getting this like cough and cold, and it would go away and come back and go away and come back. But not only that, like at some point I started to feel repulsed by the Coke, like it started to taste gross to me. And because you mentioned the sweet aversion, I don't know if I would say that the gross tasting was specifically like, oh, this is too sweet, but something started to taste gross about Coke to me, and so I stopped. And maybe my body was being like, dude, you're just overloading yourself with this highly processed food. It's not good for you. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Like I'm willing to.
Well, it's like the Great Depression infant diet studies where I think it was like Pete Pillman that posted about this, where they gave all
Oh
these
yeah.
infants basically like free choice. They could just point to whatever food they wanted, and the nurse would give it to them, and they could eat as much as they wanted. So they would do crazy things like eat a bunch of raw meat one week and then never touch meat again, or they would eat a bunch of salt until they cried and then ask for more salt. But
Yeah. So
there was like one baby that got rickets, I believe, and then uh, they pointed to they wanted the cod liver oil, and then they drank a bunch of cod liver oil for like a week, and then the rickets were cured, and then they never touched it again, right? So like, so maybe you had some latent issue that your body was like, yeah, this Coke stuff, It's gonna fix it. Just like,
Yeah. So like what you're saying, like yeah, my body was like, yeah, Coke is gonna fix your thing, and then it was like, okay, we don't need it anymore.
yeah, it recognized the Mayan corn god from the high fructose corn syrup crop, and was like, yeah, we need this guy.
Yeah. So here's the thread. So you can search for this stuff and see if you can, yeah, 20s and 30s. And so yeah, this was like a an orphanage, and they basically provided all foods, or a whole bunch of different foods in a buffet style for small kids, toddlers, stuff like that, and just let them, they were all separate, so they could actually just pick and choose what they wanted, and they cured themselves of all kinds of issues. Um, but it's like I want the fat loss I was getting from the Coke diet, and so I wonder if I tried it, if I like went back to it tomorrow, if my body would um, repulse from it. But again, I brought it up because you mentioned the sugar aversion thing, and I'm wondering if, and that as a sign that your body's producing FGF21, I'm wondering if Coke stimulates it so much that like it massively like upstarts the FGF21 more than like anything else would. Is that like possible by some means?
So yeah, what I've noticed like with the sugar aversion is it lasts like a really short period of time. You kind of get like nauseous and like aversive towards sugar a little bit for like a couple minutes, and then you go back to it, and then you can eat more, and you could just like keep eating. So maybe it's like, if it is massive, you finish the Coke, and then you're like, oh, that was good. Want another? Like maybe the levels get really high and then drop a little bit enough for you to have another.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel like it was a thing where it was like how many Cokes like I would have. Um and so there, that's interesting. Like, I love like all these little things you kind of like start to pick up and learn about, and then you start to understand what's happening because it's yeah, there's one thing you could just follow a diet and someone tells you what to do and that's fine, but of course like we're Peters, and so we want to perceive, think, act, and it's like uh but you don't necessarily know what's happening, and all of a sudden someone explains this phenomenon that you're experiencing, and you go, oh, okay, like now because you told me that this feeling or this thing can do this, then um I can adjust accordingly. But uh going back to like the other people doing these like high sugar diets, um the vegans are generally anti caffeine because they say it like promotes cortisol. And then Cole Robinson. Okay, so this is something that's interesting then, right? Like Cole Robinson made his. I mean, never followed him, but I knew who he was because he, yelled and cursed everybody, and so he kind of became like a meme. But he kind of built up his whole thing on like lots of fasting, lots of prolonged fasting, alternate day fasting, keto, stuff like that. And this guy, was kind of from what I know about him, I've actually only started watching his videos in the last like few weeks because it's like, oh, here's someone promoting high sugar and also not vegan. This is really interesting. Let's see what's going on here. And so he had a lot of experience as an athlete and cycling and boxing and stuff. So all this stuff, which is like could be very draining, doing all these like deficient diets, like I guess this guy should have a bunch of metabolic damage. Maybe he's more resilient, but I think he just lost like 20-25 pounds in like a month or two, or some kind of, maybe a few months, a short time. And he talks about doing, he's Canadian, so he calls it pop or what, yeah, pop fast. But again, he's like not to do the caffeine because of cortisol. And part of, I guess he's especially inspired by Durian Ryder, who talks about the cortisol issue. But there's maybe something specifically about soda, and that maybe it's just an easy way of just consuming sugar. Or maybe it's the high fructose corn syrup, and it's better than like juice, like because orange juice still has some protein in it. So maybe if you drink too much orange juice, could orange juice like stifle FGF21 at all?
Yeah, I think so. If you have enough.
Okay, yeah, that's like um that's the kind of stuff that I'm like, okay, like what can you mess with, right? Like I have the energy regardless right now, and that's like an amazing thing, and I'm gonna that's like enough to like sell me on this is like working for me. Another thing is the fact that like I literally don't track my macros at all, and I can pig out on carbs, and I'm not gaining any weight, I'm losing weight. Like what? So this has been this is literally just hot water and sugar. Um, I've been drinking like so. I remember I messaged you like a few weeks ago, and I was like, dude, my temps are dropping. I'm not really sure what's happening.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and and this I because I was doing like full carb days, like not even doing the honey diet, just like full carb days. Um, and my temps went up, and I was like, oh man, okay, like now we're really talking here. And then I started to get really cold, and I was like uncomfortably cold like all the time, and I was like, why are my temps dropping? Why are my temps dropping? And not just like that they're dropping, but I feel so cold. And then I realized I was just eating so much frozen fruit,
Hmm.
like so much of it. And part of it is just because like it's hard to get like fresh organic mangoes. I don't know if it's the season, but also just like, I don't live in like Hawaii or the tropics or something. So, I just found it easiest to just get frozen fruit because, it's more likely to be fresher, ripe when they freeze it, and it's already cut up and it's organic and all that kind of stuff. And so like literally the first thing I did is I just started having like hot water with sugar, especially like start my day, and it like totally fixed all my temp issues. Um, and it seems like the hot water kind of just like it stimulates the body, it stimulates the metabolism, it stimulates digestion. And I wonder like how much do you think um body temperature is like required for any of these effects or the fat loss or anything like that?
I mean, I think body temperature is kind of like a signal that everything is working. So, like the inside your cells, the level of your ATP, like main product of your metabolism, like there, it's pretty consistent. Like it doesn't vary very much. Um, but so then, if you eat more calories and you end up uh, burning more, your body temperature is going to go up. But it's like not strictly required. I suppose. I guess there's like other ways that you could eat more calories and not gain weight. Like somehow a lot more goes into your urine. Somehow you produce more ATP. Um, but yeah, so like I think it would be like pretty impossible to decouple it from having a fast metabolism, like having
Yeah.
a higher body temperature.
Does I think we kind of went off on a tangent while you were explaining all the things that FGF21 does. Um, so if we could go back to that, sorry, but like just to start, does FGF21 increase the body temperature?
It surely has to, yeah. Um, the animals that had FGF21 genetically increased, they ate like twice the calories and weighed the same or less as the other mice. So, like, it surely had to increase body temperature because if not, like, where are the calories going?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I'm sorry that we kind of went off on such a thing. I mean, we talked about good stuff, but if you just wouldn't mind really quickly, like just kind of laying out like some of the various things that FGF21 is known to do to the body.
Yeah, so like, I think I covered most of it. It really just increases metabolic rate and seems to increase lifespan as well. And it's a signal that comes from the liver, usually, and then is sent to the rest of the body, and it acts at a long distance, which is why it's known as a hormone. But it's a entire protein, so you can't really just like make it from a peptide synthesizer and inject it. It's just like a protein produced and released by the liver, causes sugar aversion. It's induced by protein deficient overfeeding of either fat or carbohydrates, and this is known to happen in humans. So people have measured this in humans.
Okay.
But other than that, it's like you know, there's like not much that you are going to feel different. Maybe higher body temperature than and obviously sweet aversion when you have high levels of it versus low.
Because I've been trying to read up more on it specifically because it seems like that's such an integral part, and so I saw that it increases insulin sensitivity. Um,
Yeah,
you
but
know,
increasing insulin sensitivity is like pretty much the equivalent of being hungrier and like demanding more calories. So like cellular, like I think that's like the whole one of the big parts of the work of Peter with the hyperlipid blog, where the cellular level satiety is called insulin resistance, and cellular level hunger is insulin sensitivity, and then you end up with like seed oils, you get inappropriately insulin sensitive fat cells. So like if you end up having seed oils transiently, right? Like this is the reason why in the studies seed oils look great, right? You can give seed oils to a person, they become immediately more insulin sensitive. But this is a bad thing in fat cells because if you fill a cell full of the seed oils, which fat cells will be full of because that's where they store fat, right? You store them in fat cells. Um, Eventually, the seed oils are going to start leaking off of the fat stores inside of the cells and then being metabolized constantly. So then you have this constant signal to the fat cells that they're hungry because they're more insulin sensitive, like all the time. And eventually you get to the level where like the fat cells are leaking so much and kind of metabolizing fat and leaking it out to the body where you have so many calories that you eventually become insulin resistant. But that's only after you're like 4 times the size. So
Huh.
then so like insulin sensitivity basically to me just means that like you become hungrier, your cells have used energy and now they're demanding more energy. So I like don't decouple that from the increase in metabolic rate in my head.
Okay, so then if seed oils are increasing, because okay, this goes back to the whole like glucose stearic acid thing
Mm.
versus the fructose MCT thing, right? We were talking about like satiety driven versus like hunger driven. And so that makes sense about the insulin sensitivity thing. And I'm aware that seed oils increase hunger. Um, so is it sort of the idea that like you're making yourself more insulin sensitive and you're making yourself hungrier, but then by eating all of the seed oils, then you're gaining weight and then you become insulin resistant like down the line. That's like what you're saying, right?
Yeah, down the line, you end up having just so many calories that are constantly being released from your fat cells that despite seed oils not being very good at causing your cells to be insulin resistant, to feel full, you have so many calories that they do feel full eventually.
Right.
But that's only after you have just like all these other things go wrong.
Hmm.
And also like it is true that you can put animals on diets of like 60-70% corn oil, like just pure seed oils, and they can be skinnier than like a mixed macro diet with like saturated fats. Like there are cases in which in animals definitively you can feed them just like basically only seed oils and they will be skinny. Yeah, I think it's like really bad to do that for health, but just like from a pure weight perspective, like if we're just messing with this like insulin sensitivity, and then also if we're messing at the level of the mitochondria, like allowing uncoupling. So uncoupling, your ATP levels are always around the same level, and if you have more calories uh, than required to produce your ATP, and you can burn them, then you produce heat, right? And you do that by what they say is like uncoupling your mitochondria. But seed oils can somehow uncouple your mitochondria at really high amounts and then can make you skinny, but only if you have like literally toxic levels of it. Um, so it's like a pretty complex picture, but like I don't think it's worth it to even mess with like going to the higher level of seed oils that can make you skinny, because they're also used as a signal for inflammation by the body. So it's like not worth it to go up there.
Right. So then, basically like if we're going from the pro-metabolic perspective, it's you want to increase insulin sensitivity, increase uncoupling, but through like the non-inflammatory sense. So like we want the hunger-driven
Yeah.
side
Well,
of the spectrum.
yeah, and uncoupling is, I think that DNP, people have taken this. It's like the drug that just like uncouples your mitochondria. It killed a bunch of people before and was banned because people used it for weight loss, and it raises your body temperature a lot. So I think it's bad. I think it's like really bad for you. I know people who have gotten like neuropathy and really terrible issues from it. And what that drug does is it causes uncoupling, but it does so maybe even before you've produced enough ATP in your cells. So it's kind of like a metabolic poison where like you don't have enough of the actual thing that kind of stores and does work with energy, but now you're producing heat instead of that. So it's like not always good to have uncoupling. And I think the seed oil uncoupling can be from these like weird structural changes that you get to mitochondria once you have all of those like at the kind of membrane area. Whereas natural uncoupling through like uncoupling proteins happens after you have produced enough ATP. So I think that like if you do like these natural things where you have plenty of saturated fats, plenty of sugar, and then you have enough thyroid or sugar to uncouple your mitochondria, it happens through these like genetic means rather than these like weird chaotic like poison or structure destroying means. Uh, so it could be good in like some contexts and bad in others.
So do you think that like if the croissant diet side of things, the satiety side, which often talks about combining starch and stearic acid, do you think you can combine fructose and MCT? Like, can you have fruit and coconut oil, or will they kind of like compete with each other?
I think you can. Um, Again, like I've tried coconut ice cream basically, and like it made me gain weight. So maybe there's like some interaction between the fat and fructose, right?
Right. Well, I guess like, in coconut ice cream, there's a lot of other stuff going on. It's not like pure coconut oil,
Yeah,
right?
it's
It's
true.
like coconut milk and um but I mean I feel like thermobolic didn't he kind of tend to say that like, he does the best when he adds coconut oil
Yeah.
to
Well, and I think his issue too was that he was becoming like really hypoglycemic. His like blood sugar was dropping too much, and I see that in people with like a lot of muscle. If they just eat pure sugar, then their muscles just like sop it all up, and then they get too low blood sugar. And then the coconut oil or a little bit of starch can help.
so then, would like I mean, I don't know exactly. I think thermobolic's bigger than I am, but I'm like 6 feet, like 205. And I have, not as much as I used to, but I still have a good amount of muscle mass. Would the solution to that just being like just to keep eating carbs and sugar so you don't go hypo?
Um, I mean, it's hard. I mean, you could, right? But if you ever want to stop eating and don't want to go hypo, then like it's kind of difficult. I think the solution generally is just like add a little bit of coconut oil, add a little bit of starch, and it should help, and it won't affect your results too much from what I've seen in those people in that population. But if you're like struggling to lose weight, and you know, I also think that the people who become hypoglycemic aren't the ones who are struggling to lose weight as much.
Right. Yeah, I mean, again, like I said, like I thought I'd be losing more weight, but that could be like, the cheating and the going out and eating with family. And I mean, I'm still like I'm not gaining weight, so um but like for me, like, one of my goals is to now I've gotten the energy, now I've gotten the sleep, so I'm like, okay, that's great, and I don't want to lose those. Um, so like I said, that's enough for me. But it's like I definitely do want to lose. Like, I mean, I probably need to lose like 20 pounds. And it's hard because like I haven't been as active, but now that I have all this energy, I'm like I wake up earlier and I have more time to fit stuff in my day, and I'm more like motivated and kind of quite literally just like driven to go to the gym and start like taking up other physical activities because the energy's um, it's there, you know. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna keep like, yeah, I guess like I have to keep trying to play with things. Maybe just if I cut out the cheat days, the fat loss will ramp up, or maybe maybe I go back to the Coke diet. Who knows?
Yeah.
Um, well, I've kept you for a little over 2 hours, and this has been great. I feel like I've learned a lot more about how this all works, and um, so what I'm curious is, what's next for you? Like, are you still kind of? I know you just came out with a book for the honey diet. Is there anything in the future, the new interesting things you're working on to figure out?
Yeah, so I just collaborated on the Fairy Princess Diet book. My sister came up with this name, and then Veronica ran with it. But she had some modifications to the diet I think that are pretty useful. So we like released that book. It's been doing pretty decently. In the future, I mean, I like want to make a lot of promises, and I'm like uh, always happy to. But my day job is like I run a biotech company, so that's taking most of my time. I'm looking to maybe make more stuff about screens and screen tech because I'm pretty obsessed by that nowadays. And I was thinking of eventually releasing this like another book. I was thinking of calling it like White Print because I think Brian Johnson he has Blueprint, and I think that it doesn't really follow what the data actually says, and I want a white pilled version of Blueprint. So
Okay,
eventually may release White Print, but I don't want to promise any timelines on that because I've like pretty laser focused on my daytime job right now.
sure. Well, yeah, I mean, a biotech company that might like lend itself to coming out with something big like that. And if you do, I'll for sure shill it out to everybody. Um, and if you want, I know you did the book. Um, Veronica blocked me after the whole um, lip filler thing,
Oh,
but I'm happy. If you want to tell people where they can buy it, I'm happy to promote it for you.
um, I guess just go to I think it's just on Veronica's bio. Really, she has like a link tree. Just go. It's just in there. I wrote the intro to it. I looked over like the rest of the book to validate like a lot of the science, and I just like helped with putting it together. I think that there's like some worthwhile information in there.
If people go to your Twitter, do you have the link somewhere there? Is it like pinned or in your bio?
I don't. Yeah, I don't. I can put it up there. I'll put it on my
Okay.
site.
This, I mean, it just be your account will be there, right, for people to just pull up and follow if they want to get your book. And um, yeah, man. I mean, I really like I'm what you have sort of came up with or helped put into words. Like I said, like I kind of instinctually did something like this, but I never would have thought to like restrict protein as much. And I think you've changed the game for a lot of people. And um, at least I myself am really grateful for the work that you've done. You've kind of started my mind working on all kinds of things too. So, um, yeah, man, thank you so much for coming on. And if you want to tell everyone your handle, I mean, I'll put it in the notes, but so people can find you.
Yeah, Anabology. Anabology. Anabology is my handle.
Awesome, man. Well, yeah, like I said, thanks again for coming on, and uh, for all the listeners, thank you for listening, and see you next time.
See.